to my small studio. So today I'm going to be starting an ink painting of a scene that I saw at the Pike Place Market. So I went to a cooking demonstration where Chef Cheng Biao Yang was pulling hand-pulled noodles. It's an incredible thing to see, and I took some video of it. So let's get right to it and check out that video. So here we are looking at the video. I'm going to go back to the very beginning, and you can just kind of watch it the way through. So you can see he's kind of prepping the noodles, and that's the motion that he's doing, where he's pulling apart the dough. This is really difficult. I've tried to do something similar to this before, and it is just it takes a lot of mastery to be able to do this. So this is a very cool thing. It's also just an interesting scene because we have these the three guys. We have Chef Yang. They're kind of rolling out the dough. We have a couple of his assistants doing the rest of the pieces. Look at him do that. Isn't that incredible? So what I'm looking to get here in the composition is I'm wanting to create some space in the composition. I want to show all three of the characters, all three of the men here, but I also want to kind of compose my own scene. So I'm just scrubbing around this video to show you kind of what I'm interested in grabbing. So I want, the first scene is with Chef Yang, and I want this kind of motion where he's pulling out the dough, like that kind of movement right there. So I'm interested in grabbing that. Also, the other part of the composition that I'd like to grab is the man in the black shirt on the left of the frame here. I want to get, there's a part where in this video where he looks up. It's right there. So on the left you can see him looking up. I like that position because it kind of relates to the main character of Chef Yang in the scene. And then there's another part during the video. You can see the man in the back who's prepping. There's a part where he kind of looks off to the left. So let me see if I can scrub. There it is, like right there. So that part, you can see him, he's in the back. And so this is an interesting configuration of these characters. I like the fact that they were kind of all looking inward at the same time if I capture all those various parts. So I want to do that. However, I want to change the position of them slightly to kind of move them closer together into the scene. So if we look at kind of what I've got going here so far. So what I've done, and let me zoom out just a little bit here. What I've done is I've just sketched in pencil the guys here to get just a basic sense of what the composition is going to look like. So I have the one helper here, and notice I've just put in the kind of core shadows, fill shadows, and cast shadows. I've just kind of lightly indicated in pencil where the guy is going to go. And then we have Chef Yang here in the middle. And then I kind of played with the positioning of one of his assistants in the back here. And I didn't really indicate any of the background or anything like that. I'm not worried about trying to get every line in. I just want to get a sense of where the light and shadow and the rough proportions of the scene. So I did this prior to actually filming and streaming live here. The reason is that although the lines look like it's kind of quickly and kind of gesturally drawn in, it looks like I did it very quickly. However, I took a little bit of care and a little bit of time to figure out exactly where I wanted to put things. And this process can take a long time. It can be really fast. Like sometimes I'll finish this really quickly, but oftentimes it can drag on. I wanted to make sure that I got to the actual painting part of this live stream. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to mix some ink. So I'm just going to put this right here so you can see it. So I'm using this Wu Kai Wen ink. So the way that I do this is I just drop a little bit of water in there. I kind of mix inks as I go along. I don't want to mix a bunch of ink all at once. I just want ink mix as much as I actually need. So I'm just going to grind off some of this ink. This is like the ASMR portion of this show. Okay. I also am just going to dip the ink right out of here with the brush. So the brush that I'm going to use is this knife edge brush. And right now, because it was cleaned, it's a little bushy. So I like to get it a little not bushy. And I do that by just getting like a little bit of water on it. And then I just pull it off with my fingers here. Right like so. It looks like it's trying to autofocus a lot. Let me just fix that really quick because it's going to be bothersome. Okay, take that off auto. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so yeah, I just pull that ink off with just with my fingers, just to get the brush a little bit wet, mostly so it gets a nice sharp edge. That's what I'm after, is that nice sharp edge. So I'm just going to put this ink off to the side, and I'll just dip in and use some of this ink. Now, one thing that I will do is I like getting a little bit of a dry brush sort of thing, so I will come in and just pull some of the ink off like that until I can get, you know, a nice sort of texture that I'm after. You know, I don't want lots of water at this point. Okay, so I'm going to start off by just trying to get some of these basic shapes in here. And in the very beginning, I'm interested in kind of memorializing some of the sketch lines that I had in here to start off with. So it's going to start off being maybe a little like just drawing and kind of outlining. But what I'm really interested in doing is pulling some of these core shadows, fill shadows, and cast shadows in. So there's a deep shadow behind his eyes right here, and I'm just going to go and push that in. Also, I'm just going to kind of make the shape of his nose come around here like so. I'm kind of lightly indicating this and starting off with the stone ink. The stone ground ink gives me a little bit of workability, because what you'll notice is that as it dries dark, or sorry, light. It dries like a kind of a light gray. It's not setting on black. I'll be using an ink a little later that actually sets in pretty black. But as is, I want to make sure that I'm kind of leaving myself enough room in the palette of the value system here so that I can go in, I can make changes if I want to, leaving myself a little bit of rope. Grab some more ink here. Now I could be going in and doing this with like a brush pen or something like that, but I think there's something nice about using a little bit larger brush at this stage. It gives the picture more of a gesturally, almost painterly kind of feel, if that makes any sense. As you just kind of struggle your way to get the shapes that you want to. On the canvas. Now I say canvas, but I'm actually working on paper, and this is a bond board that I'm working with. one thing that I have to remember while I'm doing this is to relax and breathe. Sometimes I'll sit here and I'll be working on these pictures and then I'll realize I haven't taken like a deep breath in a while. Also, like when you get these kind of overbrushed pieces because your brush is kind of fallen apart like that, I don't really mind that much. I think that's what kind of turns it into a nice looking painting. And it's all those accident pieces that make it into a nice drawing. And also, your mind tries to put those together into an image. How do those play into the pattern of light and dark and the texture that's there, and everything. So I think all that stuff is valuable to leave in the picture. So right now I'm just trying to get a sense of, I kind of have this kind of core shadow here, and now I'm just trying to pull in a fill shadow and get a little bit more of that texture as it goes up. It makes the edge of his face. Now a lot of what I'm doing right now is just memorializing some of the composition lines and composition shapes. So I'm not so concerned about getting textures right or getting in and even getting some of the large forms is all I'm caring about. I'm not caring about some of the details. And if some things end up like a little bit wrong, that's fine. I'm not worried about it in terms of like, oh, that texture looks a little strange. Oh, it looks like, in the actual thing, he has extremely short hair. If it looks like he's got longer hair at this point, now I'm not worried about it. When I'm doing this hand, I'm actually just going to pull in some shapes here. His hand is in motion, so I'm not so worried about. So you'll notice I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to pull in some like basic shapes. So you notice I'm working with kind of the light and darks. I'm not really overly concerned with, getting the exact right shapes in there. Notice I'm just pulling in almost like contour lines of just what the shapes kind of look like. So I can just make the shape of his arm down here. I can just touch in the edges to kind of anchor those pieces down here. Like that. Here's an elbow. And then I kind of go in and find some of those darker spots to make his arm stand out. And I'm just going to go and put a light line, just a light edge line around there like that. Right, like so. I think that's going to be good enough for that for now. Now, he's wearing a white shirt. I can actually show you. So that's kind of the look of the scene, and let me get the video. I can get the video so that you can see a little bit closer to that actual part that I was doing. It's like kind of like around that right there. So you see that's the scene that I'm working with. You can see all that shadow on his front arm, and the rest of the scene is pretty subdued back there. He's wearing a white shirt, and I haven't really decided at this point what I'm going to do with the composition all up of how lights and darks are going to work in the composition. I haven't decided that yet. But notice that the person to his assistant at the left of the frame has a dark shirt on, and then Chef Yang has the white shirt on. I'm going to do something with that. I haven't quite decided what yet. Perhaps something with and I'm just making this up as I'm thinking about it right now, but perhaps something with the dark shirt over here, the white shirt, the kind of this dark area as the light is kind of falling behind here. The light is kind of coming from this direction, and perhaps something with that and this background piece. You'll notice in the kind of in this part of the kitchen that they're in, there's a dark sort of piece that goes back around there. Maybe I'll try and do something with a dark line that continues from there. I'm kind of making that up as I go along, but something like that. So let's keep going here. I want to just put in some basic shadows for this shirt, and I'm going to leave this really sort of loose. And I'm just grabbing the folds of his shirt, just where the shadows are going to hit the folds of his shirt, right there. That's all I'm interested in for right now. And some of these shadows actually in the image are not that obvious. They're not this dark, but that's fine. I'm just going to lay them in like that to exaggerate the light source. I want to show his shirt kind of around over here. Something like that. You'll notice already it's very it's not black. It's kind of like a neutral gray, and that's how that's the amount of ink that I've mixed, and with the amount of water that I've used. So obviously that changes from time to time, but I like to start off with some sort of a neutral. Sometimes I'll start off with just black, just right out of the, I use a different ink that's like a pre-mixed ink, and I'll use black just right out of the container. But sometimes with images like this that I feel like are maybe a little bit more complicated, that are a little bit more complicated compositions, I like to maybe work a little bit slower. So again, I'm just kind of indicating his shirt and where this plays together. Some of this is off the screen just because this is such a big thing and I'm wanting to zoom in so you can see. And I'm going to exaggerate his body a bit here. I can pull this camera just a bit and you can kind of get a better sense of what we're doing here. So I'm just going to kind of drag these shapes over. So as I said before, I'm just memorializing some of my composition lines in the beginning. Just trying to lay down some color or some value and then let it go. Get some shadows in there. I'm becoming cognizant of the fact that I'm getting some darker kind of fill values in his shirt, which is white, and the overall composition has this a lot darker. Like his arm is probably pretty accurate for how it is, but his face has, there's light over here, but not over here. So, but I'm reluctant to go and just sweep that in yet. I want to kind of work out some more of the composition lines first before I go for that. So again, with his hand, it's kind of in motion, so I'm just going to pull this up a bit. I'm just going to kind of rake in some of the shapes of that hand. So I'm just going to pull in kind of the rough shape of his finger around right there, and then I'm just going to kind of sweep in that shape of his thumb as it goes across, you know, for him to pull in that piece. And then I'm just going to kind of indicate the edge of his hand there as he's doing that with maybe some of his, you know, fingers. So you're just getting just an indication of where his arm is in this scene, and kind of how his arm fits into the motion that he's doing. So I'm not so worried about like accurately depicting his the forms of his arm and any of that kind of stuff. I'm more just kind of going for the outline and the light at this point. So so that looks good to me in terms of that. Then we get into the dough and how the dough looks. So I'm just going to get a little bit of ink here, and I'm going to leave this pretty wet because it's going to dry in a lighter tone anyway, and I'm going to just pull in the dough. So it goes around here, and I'm just going to pull this piece in like this. So I know it looks dark now, but it's going to dry much lighter. So I'm kind of not worried about it. So that's going to be the dough. So we'll just let that dry, and it'll get kind of a lighter shade as it goes along. And also, as we increase the darks in the image, you'll see that that'll have a lighter tone overall. So he has dark pants, and that kind of sets off the lightness of his shirt. So I'm really going to pull that in as being pretty dark here. And I'm just getting a little out of control with that, with those dark values, which is fine. There's also like a little bit of an edge in here, and I'm just going to drop that edge in because I think it kind of shows the overlaps a little bit better. So at this point, I'm going to get a little bit more water, and now I think I'm going to go, I think the brush is going to dry enough, but I'm going to go and try and put in some more of the shades around the face here. So he's got like, that's a spot right there. I can also grab an edge here and say it kind of goes up, but then there's like a darker spot as we catch the edge of his whole face as it goes around like this. Under his eyes is lighter than above, so we can go right there. There's a little bit of a shadow here. I can see like the edge of this, like the under of his eyes. It's right there. This shadow is actually extending a little bit further than I had indicated initially. Looks like there's kind of that kind of a look that he has on his brow there. I think of the modeling of his nose. He's got like, I'm going to pull around a shape like that. And then the darkest piece is underneath his chin here as it shows this overlap. And he has like a little area right there. He's got a certain amount of concentration going on. Okay, I'm going to leave it right there for just a moment until we come back with some darker shades, figuring out, try and model some of those other pieces. But that's looking good. So now I'm going to go and block in some of these, some of the other pieces. So for example, this guy up in the top here, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move myself over on the edge here, and then you can get a sense of, just got to move the camera a bit as we'll start to put him in. But I do think I'm going to pull a little bit more ink into the mix. So I'll get another drop, another splash ink. So I'm going to remove some of the paint there. Okay. So now I think, and this is kind of part of the course, I usually want to do the more delicate features first. So I'm going to work on the face here. And there's some dark areas in here that is maybe not exactly how I drew it in my pencil drawing. So I'm going to try and correct some of those stuff as I go in. So, for example, this line is a little bit his eye line is just a little bit different than I had indicated it in pencil. So I'm going to go and try and fix some of that stuff. Just subtle corrections. He has kind of a serious look on his face. Maybe I'm making him look a little more serious than he actually was, but that's okay. I'm kind of trying to set a mood here. Kind of moving the position of his mouth as I'm doing this. And by the way, I'm not like overly concerned with getting an accurate likeness. I'm more just trying to get the composition of the scene that I want. So if I were doing this as a portrait or a commission, I would be much more concerned about some of the likeness pieces in here, but I'm not. So I'm just trying to make it a convincing kind of description of the light that happened, not worrying so much about the forms. These are decisions you can make when you're painting and you're not taking a photograph. It's my scene, you know. I'm deciding what this looks like, and by the emotion that I'm showing on these people's faces, I'm deciding what they were thinking and what happened here. So I can add, you know, kind of an air of seriousness and an air of drama to it, as I see fit. I don't need to worry about what was actually happening at the time. Of course, the whole reason I chose this to begin with is that something was interesting, something struck me about what I saw, and so there's obviously stuff there that I want to hold on to, but I don't need to kind of faithfully try and copy these exact people, etc. It's my scene. I get to do what I want with it. Later on in the after this moment, this guy that I'm painting right now, he made one of my favorite dishes, which is da xiao mian, where you take this kind of almost a tube, cylindrical shaped knife, and you just cut the dough and you just sling it right into the boiling water to make these cut noodles, knife cut noodles. Oh, they're just so good. And it's a true skill to be able to do that thing. So this guy is a master in his own right, as he's watching Chef Yang do his thing here. Okay, so that's essentially it's a decent block in of that part. I didn't exactly follow the same light logic I did. You notice, you know, from here the light's all coming from here. It's kind of coming from here. Like maybe there's a light kind of somewhere between the guys in there. I don't know. I'm gonna leave it for now, and I'll kind of towards the end maybe go back and tweak that. But what I am going to do is kind of scribble indicated some hands here. So I'm going to go in and maybe shore that up a little bit with some basic shapes here. And it's towards the end of the whole page here. So I'm not going to worry about it so much. Like I just want to make sure that you know what it is and what's kind of happening here. Which is going to be a little ambiguous. I chose this. He's holding some sort of a spoon that has it's like a strainer spoon. That's kind of what he's holding here. So it's going to be a little ambiguous as is, but that's okay. So again, I'm just going to pull in some of these shapes just around the corner like that, just to kind of show what's going on. Also, I'm kind of making some of this hand up. It actually doesn't look so logical in the video, but I'm kind of just making it look a little more hand-like. And he's got kind of a funny gesture with his fingers there, but I'm making it look a little bit more like a hand, just so you know what it is. So it doesn't exactly match the video, but hey, at least you have a sense of kind of what the thing is. I'm also going to change the shape of this a little bit. So I want this to be kind of like this shape. And it's going to have like a little bit of a basket on the bottom here. It's not perfect, but I'll take it. Kind of some shapes right there, shape right there, and then just pull in the bottom of his hand. So pull, 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 and then pull all the way across. And that'll be that. And then I'm just going to kind of touch in some of the outlines, just so I can kind of keep track of them for myself, of where this is here. There's some other pieces to this, like for example, there's something he's holding a bowl, and there's something in the bowl, but I'm not going to worry about trying to draw that in, because at some point there's too much stuff and it just makes the image confusing. And I'm not trying to take a photograph here. I'm trying to just communicate what happened in this scene and in an interesting composition. So I'm not worried about going and trying to get credit for representing everything in the scene. I don't need that. I also don't need to get these shapes exactly right. Notice I'm kind of being a little bit loose with how all these things fit together. That's okay. There's kind of a pattern on the outside of this, and if I just roughly indicate some stuff here, watch, like I'll get some brush strokes in here. It'll be like that, and then there's going to be like a little kind of like a little leaf pattern right there, and then there's going to be like a little right there, like that, and then I'm going to go down and I'm going to pull up from the bottom and pull up from the bottom, pull up from the bottom. And then I'm going to kind of pull my edge in here a bit. There, now you get a sense that it's a bowl and there's some pattern on the bowl. And then I can just leave it at that. That can be the indication I use. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load up the brush here. I get some of it off because it's really wet. So I don't want to get that wet, but kind of wet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and kind of pull these edges out, because this is going to be the extent of this sort of dark area that I was mentioning earlier when I was talking about composition. So I'm going to do a darken this. I'm going to go over this probably with a stronger black, but I'm just putting it in right now so I can get a sense of what the composition looks like with these pieces in play. some more ink here. If I pull back a bit here, you'll be able to see that there's where the edge of the table is. So I'm just going to kind of indicate the edge right there, like so, just so I get a sense of where it is. There, it kind of goes this direction. Make a little bit of a correction. There. Okay. So there's two of our forms in there. I'm going to get like a little bit of more light and shadow kind of in here, so that we could just get the sense of the light logic as it's working in here. There, that's probably good. So the dough is actually much darker than I was thinking it was going to be. I thought it was going to lighten up quite a bit, but that's okay. I'm not worried about it. The overall, like I've just kind of scratched the surface of getting the basic sort of halftone light and darks in there. So we're at a halftone now. We're not even to the darkest dark. So if it stays as dark as a halftone, that's totally fine. I'm not worried about that at all. So I'm going to block in this third character here, which could be one of the more interesting pieces of this, just because of the positioning and the kind of the relationship between these characters. Here, I'll put me in the bottom. So from the original composition, I've moved this guy around. He used to be between the already two blocked in characters, but I've moved them together much more closely. I've taken two different snippets in time to create a correspondence between the men, and now I've done the same thing with this character, moving him way over and kind of having him also have a correspondence to the main character, just kind of building my own composition here. So this character's in the background, and notice that I had a drawing where I had him a little higher up, and I pulled him down a bit. And the reason was that if you just look like at, oops, I'm not showing you properly here. If you just look at these two characters, like they're almost even though this character is in the background. But this figure is lower, right? I lowered him even more. And then the scale is such that you can see he's further back. So the fact that he is further back and also kind of in a two-dimensional sense, kind of lower in these characters, I liked this look on his face for that reason. Not that there's any of these dynamics that actually exist in the real scene, but I think just in terms of an artwork and a composition, it tells an interesting story, and that's what I like about it. So because he's further in the back, I'm not going to give the same detail to this character. So I'm just going to try and put in some of the main landmark aspects of his features, and I'm going to leave him pretty blocked in. He's not going to be, not going to worry about getting, certainly not going to worry about getting a likeness, but I'm barely going to worry about even getting like some cohesive forms in here. You might be looking at this and like, oh, it's too dark. I don't care. I'm not worried about that at this point. You know, one of the most common questions I get is, God, how long does it take to do that stuff? How long did it take you to do that artwork? Well, so running time We've been live for 57 minutes, so I would say about 50 minutes of that is the block-in so far. Ink painting, I feel, works fast. Like you're quickly putting shapes in. So I feel like, as opposed to say oil painting, or even if you're doing some sort of like a drawing, or any sort of drawing or painting, I think you're taking a lot more care, and you're also not getting the benefit of the medium doing a lot of the work for you. And when you're ink painting, the medium does a lot of the work for you in terms of just the brush kind of puts in textures that you're not trying to fill in yourself, and it kind of accomplishes quite a bit for you without you having to explicitly go in and draw every line in. One thing you'll notice, you've probably seen a couple times as I'm painting this, is that if you paint something, drop the ink on, and then go over it, it goes a shade darker. So you can use that to your advantage. But also it's something to note that if you put the paint on over top, it's going to go darker. So oftentimes you'll see artists, if they're using like if they're using a pencil or other mediums, they'll go in and they'll kind of sketch in a thing. Well, the more you sketch, the darker it gets. So you get a chance. You lay it on, you don't like it, then don't keep doing it. You need to move somewhere else. Some of this is a game of constantly trying to fix things that you've done. Okay, so we're almost good with the block in on this guy. I'm going to go and just kind of put his shirt in. He has a light colored shirt as well, which compositionally I think is going to be pretty cool. So I'm liking how this is ending up. I'm going to correct that a little bit though. I think I got a little over exuberant with my pencil sketch here. And I'm just going to let this side of him trail off. Now the light kind of came from this direction down, so I'm going to, well, one gets more ink. Ah, Tony's here. What's up, man? Old buddy. Thanks. It's funny, the first time, this is actually the second of these live feeds that I've done. The first one I didn't publicize or anything, so no one actually showed up, but I was so nervous. And then the video's still up. Like, you can go check it out. The video's still up, and when I did the intro, hey, I'm Matt, blah, 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 I was so nervous. I have no idea why, but anyways, my wife was looking at it, and Michaela was like, are you holding your mouth funny? Like, what the hell are you doing? And I was so nervous, you could just totally see it on the video. It's kind of ridiculous. Oh, and also there's like an 8-second delay here, so as soon as I see it, you'll see me respond to it 8 seconds later. Of course, Tony, now that you're here, I'm really digging the watercolors that you're doing. That stuff is super cool. Stuff's looking really good. It seems like every one you post seems to get a little bit better. All right, I'm just gonna pull around this arm and this elbow here. So there's arm. Right like that. There's a darker shade here. The shirt kind of comes in about right there. And then we've got there's kind of a shift to his body here. As we have these bottom sections of this guy's shirt. So I'm going to show him basically. I'm going to say he looks like that. And then I'm going to pull in some sections here. Carla says that her hand would be shaking through this. My hand is shaking. You just can't tell on the scene. I don't have to. The question is, do I need to load the brush very often? So you see like this like half tone. I don't really. And I have my ink just sitting here, and I just get a little bit on there, and it's not a matter of having to load the brush so often, so much as a matter of having to dab it off, because I don't want a whole lot of water to go on. I want to keep this halftone, and I've mixed the amount of ink that I want to go on here. So it's not really a matter so much of, and it's going on dark right now, but it'll lighten up as it dries. So I want to follow this crease in the shirt. Now that you guys are here, let's look at, so there's the reference photo. So from this video, now that you guys are watching. And if we look at, so there's kind of the scene of the first guy. So we have that piece as he's, folding out the dough and putting it in there. And then notice it, so there on the left of the scene, you can see that there is the character there. So I can kind of bring this over and you can see there's that guy in the scene there. So the character that I'm working on right now, the figure in the back, you'll notice that he has like, we'll see the reference that I'm using, that I painted him from, and it's like, oh, where is it? He's right there. So you notice he has like these creases in his shirt as he's kind of twisting back around. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to say that's good for blocking in that background character. And now I'm going to think about that background space and how to ground it behind the table. So in terms of that table, I want to get a little bit darker ink than I have right now. So first I'm going to get a little bit more of that. And as I was saying earlier, this is like the ASMR version of this show, portion of the show where we listen to the scratching ink. All right, that's good. And then I'm just going to pull some of this out, this ink here. And then I want to get some of that composition in the back. Like I want to, so I think it's about there. I'm not quite sure. there's kind of like some interesting shapes back here. So I think this guy has like a table or something right next to him. So I'm just going to pull that down to there. And then I'm going to, there's kind of like this is going to go down to there. And then I'm going to pull that like that. And I'm not really worried about what this stuff actually is in the background. I just want to have the shape there so that I can kind of use it to ground this other guy. So, and it's going to go basically like that across. So I'm just going to kind of get this shape in here like that. And I'm going to pull this down around like so. This is all going to be dark, so I'm not worried about how many times I'm going over it. This is basically the first coat of this. I want this to be like super dark. Okay, so there's that, and it kind of continues through, and I'm just going to say it's going to continue through right like so, like that. And then right like that. And since I am just planning to make this super dark, I'm just going to pull these shapes in down like this. And this guy. This guy's wearing like kind of some dark jeans down through here. Okay, and then I'll add some of that dark action down here. Okay, so that's going to essentially be the scene. So this is a block in. I want to darken up the shirt here next. So I'm going to just look at what does the light logic do. And it's kind of going to come across thing. I'm going to leave that open a bit. Around here. And then pull this across and leave that. There we go. All right. So I'm pretty much gonna, so the question was, am I going to come in, am I gonna make it darker, and am I gonna use a different brush? I'm gonna use probably the same brush the whole time. Unless I want like some sort of, unless I want some kind of almost like effect on the brush, then I'll use something that's gonna have a strong effect. So, like for example, like let's say I wanted something that was going to have a very kind of brushy effect. So I'd add something like this, where I'd use this brush, where it's a horsehair brush, and I mean this thing is going to be big open spaces. It's going to make lots of texture and that sort of thing. But if I don't want like an effect really, then I'll just stick with using this one on this size, because you know this is a pretty small picture. So yeah, I think you know this is it's a fairly small size to be working with, and also probably a fairly small size to be trying to do any sort of effects on. But as I get further down the line with this one, I don't know, I may try and do something, you know, more fun and brushy with it. I don't know, I'll just have to see how I feel about it once we get there. Okay, so I want to go and kind of maybe highlight some of these edges a bit, just so you get a sense. Although it's not going to highlight too much with this until we start using a black. So what I am going to do to get dark is it's going to be like I'm going to use it right out of the bottle. So it's going to be like a half tone. There's going to be a light wash probably that I'll go in to fill in some of the shadows, and then I'm going to use like a really dark pen to go in and hit all the dark spots. A 10 in 1, like I don't even know what that means. Like you mean like is this brush a 10 in 1 as in like is it a 10 brushes all in one, or is it like 10 sizes all in one, or I don't know. Essentially like this this Daniel Smith, dagger edge one. I've ended up using this one just because I like the sort of dry textures that it makes. Okay, so now the question is, where do we want to highlight some core shadows? That I've got like a general like lights and darks, and I've blocked everything in. So I think that some of the deepest kind of shadow parts are in here and around in underneath his eyes. What I didn't kind of put in initially was the space right there. I'm going to just go and strengthen some of these shadows in, and so I'm going to go and put some of these darker pieces in. This will be the first pass of this. I'll probably do many. Starting to look maybe a little bit more like the guy, but here you can check out the if you look at him again, so we'll do like this reference. So if you look at this guy, here I'll get back to that, the shot of him actually doing this. So if you look at that shot of him, and here I'll make him a little bit bigger and move him over a bit so you can see. You'll see that the lights and darks between them, I was unwilling to, initially when I was doing the block in, to go as dark as he is, to have the shadow areas be like that. But I'm going to do that now. I'm going to bite the bullet and make that happen. So I don't know. This is the part where you could maybe screw it up, but I don't care. It's fine. I'll be able to fix it if it's not perfect. So I'll just get this a little bit dry, and I just want like that sort of action. And I want to get some of the lights and darks in here. So for example, this whole area is in shadow, and this whole area is in shadow, and then he's got like this area here in shadow. He's got like a little bit of light here. That's in shadow. That's in shadow. And this whole area, this whole side of his face is going to be in shadow. And I'm worried about like that. And I want this area to be come over like that. And that's starting to look good, where you get this whole top plane where it's starting to be light there, except it doesn't quite go down that high. So there's that piece, and then there's this whole side of his head is basically covered up like that, and there's a light spot that hits like right there on his scalp. So I'm just gonna kind of leave that spot in there like that. That's better. That's a much better setup of lights and darks. His cheekbones really come out far. Like if you see this edge here, and then I can find that same edge kind of over here, I can start to say, okay, there's an edge right there, and I can darken that in a bit. Right, that starts to look a little bit maybe more accurate to how he looks, but I'm not so worried about that. There is, however, like a little shadow right there. I'm going to put in, makes that whole piece look a little bit better. All right, so now that I have these midtones, I think I'm gonna go for the darker one. Oh, did I tell the real people that I'm going to do an illustration of them? I did not. Um, no, I took this video in 2017 during a cooking demonstration, and this was during a demonstration. I took the video, and then I'm kind of like now arranging my own composition out of the video that I took. And no, I did not tell them that I was doing this. However, since you mentioned it, um, uh, you should totally go. So this man is his name is Chef Cheng Biao Yang, and he has a restaurant in the Pike Place Market called Country Dough. One of my favorite Chinese food restaurants, or just restaurants. It's a really great place, and obviously he's magic with the dough and what he does here. So no, I did not. I did not say anything about this, and I would imagine that instead of them being like, "Hey, why are you drawing me?" I imagine they would be happy for the free publicity, and um, and they are totally deserving of it for sure. Um, so if I would do this in watercolor, um, so you're saying if you do this watercolor, you use like 3 to 5 brushes. Yeah, I think in traditional painting, I think people like traditional sort of Western, quote unquote, Western style painting. I think the bias is towards using a lot of different brushes to get different shapes and textures and things. But there, for me, there feels something like just nice and simplistic about using a brush to do um, make your picture. So I haven't done anything other than one brush. Typically, like if I want to get really detailed lines, I'll get out like a brush pen or something like that to make really detailed lines, just because it's faster and I kind of lose patience. But okay, so I've done a standard, just like almost like a base coat here. So now I'm using this is a pre-mixed ink, and I do this just so because it has a different quality of black that I like, but it is I got ink all over the name, so I always forget the name, but it's Dollar Rowney and Dollar Rowney, and this is an acrylic based ink, which is kind of strange, but it's not water soluble. It is or it's I don't know what I'd say, water resistant, non-clogging pigment, and yeah, it's essentially acrylic ink. Um, so it doesn't have a gloss to it, which is sometimes I don't want a gloss. I have other inks that are a little bit glossy, but I find mixing some inks that have gloss and some that don't, you don't get like kind of a desirable effect. So kind of off camera, you can see me. I'm just putting it right on the brush, and I'm just going to mix it in nice and thick. And now I'm going to go and find some darks in the composition. And darks are not necessarily going to be like, oh, he has dark hair, or there's shadows, there's really deep shadows. So I'm going to go find some deep shadows. I can put those in. But what I'm really concerned with at this point is I am going to go and just find core shadows. That's what I'm really interested in. So I want to find areas of dark shadow, but I'm going to find patterns of core shadow. So these edges, I want to stay around from edging too much. I'm kind of going in here and, you know, doing as I, not doing as I say. But okay, so then this arm that's in the dark, I'm going to go and find a core shadow edge here, and that's really going to bring out the it really brings that arm forward so that you can see he's got that motion. So again, not the darkest thing in the scene, but just by virtue of really getting those core shadows in there strong. I don't want to line too much, but I just want to suggest the outside of that hand so that it sets it apart from the background. and right there. So there's that piece. I'm gonna find some shadow points to drop in there now that my brush is getting a little dry, so I can get maybe a little bit better halftones. So there's a core shadow that's like right there, and catching his cheek on that other side, we've got, oh, there's one right there, and we can get one like right there. I think that's probably good, and I'm going to get another one right there because I'm getting greedy. On his, so he does have, like, his hair is really short, so I'm just going to go and maybe do some little fill strokes in here to get his hair in. The light colored hair. All right, like so. Okay, and I'm going to, well, let's see. I want to get like a little bit of a, there's a core shadow there that I want to pick up. There, just really bring the edge of that form out so that you know that is his hand, his arm going back down there. Let me get some more of this black ink here. And now I'm going to go and really get some darkness down here. I'm not going to worry about getting the table totally straight. I think it kind of stands up for itself there. I am going to kind of solidify that edge though, like so. And I'm just going to go in for these core shadows on here. It's a white shirt, but that doesn't mean that I can't use the use some contrast here to just kind of touch in some core shadows there. Top of the black, make it look nice. Down here as well. And again, the core shadows are the one, that's what shows the form of what's happening here. You get a sense of the form of the shirt. Core shadows show the form. Okay, so there's that. There's also a shadow that comes down across here, but I think I'm going to wait until I do the lightest. So I did the middle, I'm doing the dark, and then once I do the light, then I'll probably go in here. I was actually just going to use this brush the whole time, but I don't know. Tony, you're inspiring me maybe to do some bigger stuff, so I don't know. Maybe I'll think about that as we get closer. So the other dark area I want to get is this guy's shirt in here that's going to link these backgrounds up. So yeah, I'm just going to pull this all the way around. I kind of left some light spots here to show how the light is hitting this guy's shirt. So I'll leave some of those halftones in there as well. I'm also not worried. Obviously, I'm not paying too much attention of, the anatomy of this guy's hand. I'm really just trying to get the light and shadow parts correct. So. Let's get some more ink. I'm putting the ink on and then I'm like pushing it into this brush because I'm just putting the ink like right on with the dropper, just on the edge of the brush, and then this kind of just works it into the rest of the brush, so I get like I can get an even stroke as I go through. That's basically all this is really doing. It doesn't really rub a whole lot of the ink off. It looks like it is, but it's really not. Like you get quite a bit of ink. And this paper that I'm using just really soaks up the ink. So you're not going to benefit too much, or you're not going to lose too much by, pushing it in throughout the rest of the brush, getting the ink soaked through the whole brush, as opposed to like, worrying about rubbing it off or something like that, or wasting it, which would be a bigger issue. Now I want to leave this bowl in halftone pattern. I want to just find the edge of our halftone. So I want to just find the edge of this bowl. And clearly I don't need to worry about exactly getting it in there, but I can just close enough. At some point I start to get impatient, and then I'll fight that the whole time. Fighting impatience. Because I'll want to just get in there and finish this up. But I'm just going to fight that the whole time. So just putting on ink. Okay, I'll probably leave it like that. I guess you guys can't see here, I'll move me over here for now. So you can see like there's some like little effecty kind of stuff happening down here. I'm gonna leave it like that. So again, I'm gonna get some ink on here and brush it in, and then now I'm gonna go and try and find touch in some of these core shadows again. So I'm gonna leave that as it is, but he's kind of got some around in the hand here. I'm gonna kind of put some of these here, just to get a sense of how that hand is put together, that's all. And then this one as well, he's kind of got like there's a knuckle showing here, and then I'm going to pull this up, pull that up, pull this around, and pull the hand up out of that. There it is. I mentioned this before, but I'll mention again, is when you're working in ink like this, the goal is to get the brush to do the work, get the ink in the brush to do the work, and that's an example of that, where you're pulling in those shapes, and you're not worried about going in there and trying to put the shapes in there. You're just pulling them in place, and I'm just indicating the stuff. I'm not trying to like, heavy-handed go in there and quote-unquote draw all the shapes in. So I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I can go in on his face and find some of those subtle little light areas. So just push this all in here like this. All right, so nice. Let's go and find some light and dark in here. So I'm just going to find the areas of the darkest dark first. I just want to find some of these areas to stick edges. Pull that in. Some of this just requires the lightest touch. It's too much and the whole thing will just fall apart. But the brush is starting to get dry enough that I can drag in some darker pieces now. There we go. I'm just going to touch in some of these pieces, and I know I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to outline his chin there. And touch in some core shadows there. It's pretty dark underneath here, so I'm going to get some more shadow in there. Maybe that was too much, but I'm not going to worry about it. And then there's his hair, which is kind of the darkest part, so I'm just going to drop a bunch of that in and not worry about it. Around the corner as well. There we go. That looks good. Now we're going to go on to this guy over on the side here. Before I think about getting back to the gentleman. So as I said, this guy's in the background. I'm not going to do him too dark. I'm going to get like a fair amount of contrast in with that figure. So just rub this in. So the darkest parts really are just, if I'm going to indicate, the thing is he's got like underneath his eyes, there's kind of a spot right there, underneath his mouth. Right there. I can just touch a spot right there. Inside of his ear, the light's getting up in there, right around like that. And then he's got his hair. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to touch in the kind of aspects of his hair. Pull around the corner like that. And I'm going to just kind of trail this off on that side. I'm going to pull up from the bottom here. Leave that as it is. Get some core shadows in there. And largely leave that as is like that. He kind of has like a little bit of like that kind of bent to his face. I'm going to leave it just like that. And when I get in with the halftone, I think I'm gonna, or with the lightest shade, I think I'll probably go in and add some pieces to that. But now I can go in and just kind of touch in these core shadows to give some depth to this shirt here. And again, it has a fair amount of contrast here, so I'm just going to leave it. Just going to get some of these darker pieces in here, down here around his elbow. So that's a dark spot right there. And there's like a little bit of a shadow there. On the edge of that. Put that right there. All this is pretty dark. And on that side. And then as his shirt kind of comes in. And then he's got like the really dark pants, so I'll go and just drag in some super dark stuff. If this being my first real live stream is any indication, I'm the kind of person that says it's going to be an hour, and then it actually ends up being a 2-hour thing. It's probably a good thing for me to remember. And I'm going to leave that right like that. The next thing I'm going to do is put in these bottom pieces. I'm going to get quite a bit of ink here because this is going to be the dark spot. So I want to get the bottom edge of that table in there. There's some parts where the table doesn't, like there's like a leg right there, so I'm just going to kind of find an edge in here, find an edge right there, and then I'm just going to pull down down. There it is. So I'll just use some of this ink that's here. Pull down. And pull down. Down like that. And then pull down over top like that. There you go. Maybe I'll pull down right next to that. Maybe to highlight that little piece right there. And then I can move me, and I can find the edge of this, pull down, back up. The edge of this little table in the back, pull down, pull down, pull down, pull down, down like that. Get last little bit of this ink off here, and then find the edge like this. And then find the edge, pull down, and then I'll get that last little bit. Okay. I want to kind of strengthen this edge up, so I'm just going to drop a thick line. Okay. All right, so that's essentially it with the darks. I'm going to go and find some edges in his hand here too, because I feel like that's important. There he goes. Yeah, strengthen some of those pieces up. Like that. the more contrast I can get against his arm against this thing, the lighter it'll make the dough look. The dough is starting to look kind of light against the overall palette, so I'm generally happy with that. You gotta sharpen your monochromatic skills. I find that for me, color is distracting. I find that, I think color obviously has its place, um, but I don't know. I've just never been that fond of color, I guess. Um, I feel like convincingly showing the lights and darks and the value composition in a scene can just really tells a story. I feel like you can see, like, in the technique that I'm using right now with this thing where the brush is doing a lot of the work, and and like the brush is doing a lot of the work. It's getting a lot of texture in there, and I'm using the same ink, and there's a simplicity about it. It gives a sense of timelessness to the piece. Like, it doesn't feel like it's rooted in, at some time point. If I used like acrylic paint and there were colors, all those kind of decisions would make it feel like it was, done at a certain time. It would be referential of some time. And there's something that I feel is nice about it just having a timeless quality to it. You're saying, am I going to sign it with this brush? Sometimes, I don't know, I'm kind of weird about signing pictures, and that I get really nervous signing them at the end. So, like, I don't know. I'll probably use like a sharper brush to sign with if I sign like along the edge or something like that. I'll use something like a brush pen or something like that usually, just because I get so nervous about signing. In fact, oftentimes, like when I do a pencil sketch, I'll sometimes sign it first. Because I'll sign it and then it's over. It's not like escalating commitment of getting the whole thing together and then being like, oh crap, I can't sign it. All right, so now the fun part is going to come where I'm going to figure out how to. I'm just going to put in some blanket lightest light tones, and so Tony, you've completely inspired me, and so I'm going to use the horsehair brush, and we're just going to get some big shapes in there. So first off, let's mix a little bit of ink. So I'm going to use 2 drops. Usually I use kind of like 1. So 2 drops. And I'm going to, again, here's the ASMR part of the show. I'm going to get like a little bit of ink in there. So that's it. Then I'm going to put 1 more dash of water there, just so we get enough water. And yeah, let's just go big. Let's go big with the big brush. So I'm going to get this around in here, get this nice and wet. So this is a horsehair brush. It creates really interesting textures in the thing. Okay, so before I go at it with this, I'll show you. Again, we want to see what the overall light and dark of this looks like. So, so here's the reference. Here's a reference of what we're doing. Here, let's just check out. You can see this happening. See, he's just pulling out the dough. Such a magic thing. So he's going to do it again when he puts this in. Cuts it, throws it in there. So the overall light, you see there's like that one light in the back for the scene. And so he has a really strong kind of white light. And I've kind of captured that to some degree, but when I put in the lightest lights, you're going to really check that out. It's just magic how he does this. He's pulling the dough apart. Put it in. So there was the scene that I did. Right there was the pose. Putting it in, slaps it down, cuts it, sticks it in. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be trying to get some of those darkest dark pieces in there. So let me kind of set this up a little bit better. So we got the darkest darks, we got the kind of a medium. So then the idea with this brush is we want to get in this is where we start to indicate the overall kind of compositional light and where the light is. So it came from this direction and it's over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull down right here and pull across. And I want to get in these shapes. Again, the beauty of using these kinds of brushes and these techniques is you get a lot for free. It's pulling in a lot of these textures from the horsehair brush, and it does it all on its own. So then I'm going to kind of put in a secondary tone. I'm going to do it like kind of right here. There, right like so. Like that. You can see this guy over in the corner, except you got my big head in the way, so I'll put you down here. So over here, so we got like, I'm going to kind of get us a shape right there, pull in across his body, and then kind of just pull this piece down and around in like so. So we can start to get those shapes there. Then I'm going to load this brush up a little bit more. And I'm going to get some of these finer shapes. Like this is all much darker than it kind of even really seems from the video, from the reference video. So I'm going to come and pull in some of these shapes here and just darken this up. Really get some of that light logic in place. If you're wondering if I'm at all nervous about using this gigantic brush, and you're thinking like, oh, you'll screw it up. Yeah, I am worried about it, and yes, I have screwed these up before, and yes, I may screw this one up, but that's fine. That's kind of part of the process of learning to paint, and learning to paint like this is you just take these risks. And it's totally fine. You just do it again. In the space of, let's see, we've been running for 1 hour and 50 minutes, so this has been essentially, like, let's just call it 2 hours. You could spend another 2 hours and, you know, kind of get back pretty quickly to right where you were, and just go at it and try it again. And it's not the end of the world. I'm thinking that I like where it's ended up now. So I'm thinking that the light and shade values are pretty good, except this spot right here I want to darken up a bit. So I'm liking like where it is, so I think I'm going to leave it about right here. I may come back to it later, and I may decide to maybe go in and add some textures, or maybe add some more detail, maybe add some more darks, maybe like thin it out and lighten it up a bit, but generally speaking, I like where it is. So I'm gonna call it, and I'm gonna say that this is pretty good. So thanks for watching, and I'll be putting this up on Instagram. You can see what the final looks like. I'll take some nice photos of it and some up close ones so you can see kind of where we got to. And yeah, thanks for following along, and I hope to see you next time. Make sure to subscribe so you can see the next date and time for when we take on the next scene. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you later. Bye.